In a world where polemical debate between theists and atheists is reaching a fever pitch, some seek to find common understanding and agreement. This is a place where we begin with differences and end with similarities. This is Apologia.
So Bill Craig raised the point, so he and Hitchens are having a debate on the 4th of April at Biola University.
Already sold out. They're trying to get overflow at this point.
And I can already sort of anticipate that it's going to be a very frustrating experience for Craig if Hitchens uses his normal style, which is it's not necessarily he doesn't exactly present. So Craig has a very organized and rigid style in how he presents his arguments, and it's he lists them out and he's very precise in how he words things. But Hitchens is all over the place, and he bounces from one argument to the next, and I could see the frustration on Craig's face just at listening to him, trying to make sense of, okay, now what is he addressing now? What is he addressing now? Now he's talking about something else. So Hitchens has a very much it's more free-flowing, loose approach to debate. He just sort of gets up and talks. I don't think he really. I mean, he does take down notes, but just the way he presents things is, it's not Dr. Craig's style. And so I would imagine it would be very interesting. And actually, we have Dr. Craig here. We were just talking about your final comment about your future debate with Hitchens. So what are you thinking about that?
Well, I was baiting him a little bit, obviously. I thought I would have a good tease to tell him come better prepared next time. That was deliberate attempt to kind of bait him a little bit and provoke him. But I'm glad for this session today because it did give me a preview of what it's like being with Christopher Hitchens in person, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting.
It strikes me, just sort of comparing the two of you, because I've seen you debate and I've seen him. You have a very deliberate and ordered style to the way you present things, and he's just bebopping and scatting all over the place. It's very tough to follow what exactly the arguments are that he's actually drawing from, and I can imagine that'd be very frustrating to you. How are you going to rein him in?
Well, I plan to try to make him stick to the arguments and then to analyze his objections so as to try to summarize in a pithy way exactly what his central objection is. And it does seem to me his central objection is the problem of innocent suffering. All of the examples of that are just mere illustrations of this central question: how could an all-loving and all-powerful God be so indifferent to suffering? I think that's really the root question from his side.
Dr. Craig, we were talking about the problem with a panel like this. It seems like the panelists sometimes don't know if this is a debate or a discussion. This was the Christopher Hitchens show, it seems. I mean, he talked about 90% of the time. Probably good for the audience to hear. This is mostly a Christian audience. Maybe, hear from one of the four horsemen of the new atheism and so on. But him not responding to the 10 arguments, do you think that he didn't feel like he needed to, that he just wanted to
No, I think he's incapable of doing so. I think it's very clear that he doesn't have the intellectual substance to respond to these arguments. And so what he does as he answers, if you listen carefully, is switch subjects. So often in response to the moderator's questions, he would switch things around and come back at another angle and turn up, trying to turn the tables and answer quite a different question. He's very weaselly in that sense. He's oily. You gotta hang on to him because he'll turn the question around and start addressing something else. So I think that frankly there's just a lack of intellectual substance there that is masked by rhetoric and colorful phraseology and things like that. And that makes him engaging to an audience. That's what's tough, is that he will emotionally win the audience because of this sort of appeal.
Bill, we know you have to get to another panel, so we're going to let you go. reasonablefaith.org, and thank you so much for taking some time.
Absolutely.
Glad to be with you guys today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I think we just got word that Christopher Hitchens is going to come our way in a moment.
The great professor himself.
Yes, in fact, here he comes.
So, Professor, very Good to see you again,
Thanks.
sir, of
I'm
course.
Kevin. Good to see you.
We're just decompressing. We were just sitting back here watching the panel and wanted to get your thoughts. Dr. Craig came over and yes, he came over and he shared some thoughts about your upcoming debate at Biola. So what do you think about this panel, and what do you think about speaking to a room full of Christians?
Well, first, I'll answer your question in reverse order, if that's
okay.
all right.
Absolutely.
As for speaking to the large room, I'm almost getting too used to it, but I shouldn't, because I shouldn't take for granted the very warm, very generous response I've had from American Christians for the most part since I started this book tour. I mean, I've had a lot of hospitality, a lot of invitations to have my challenge taken up, and I'm very grateful for it. And so that's today was a very, very good example. And I was really privileged because almost all the questions were for me, and I think I was allowed more time than any of the other panelists. But I didn't get a single hostile question, which, I mean, people shouldn't think I would mind if that. But at the end, there was a slight needling element in what Dr. Craig said, and what struck me about the panel, and particularly his approach to it, was, and I've begun to notice this more and more, it seems increasingly the case that Christians think that the story can be proved, that it's actually a matter of evidence. Now, this didn't used to be the situation. They now want to have debates with physicists, about evidence that they didn't even know existed when their faith was 1900 years old. Now they want to say, oh, that proves us right as well. I would strongly urge them not to do this, because it leaves no room for faith.
So is this
everyone today was arguing as if it's a matter of interpretation of irrefutable or unarguable evidence.
Right.
And I'm just flabbergasted by this new tack. It seems to me to suggest that faith is weakening.
Oh.
If you want so much evidence, the faith must be going down the tubes.
So maybe this is the new Christianity in response to the new atheism.
I have a feeling that it is partly a synthesis of our challenge that is... Mine isn't so much, but... because I think the case against God was complete long before Darwin and long before Einstein. But yes, doctors Dawkins and Dennett and Sam Harris and others are good scientists.
And I've been I've been going to a lot of the panels here at this convention, and I think the overarching consensus is that this is a post-Christian society, and the Christians are just now coming to terms with that. And so what do you think, going forward, what should be the position of sort of the atheist movement for whatever it's worth?
Well, there are two fronts on which this is being fought out. Three, actually. One is the separation of church and state in general. The wall of separation, so-called.
Build up the wall.
Thomas Jefferson's expression on matters like the teaching of evolution in schools, or not, and or on whether canon law should be brought to bear on things like contraception and abortion, and whether Catholic politicians can be excommunicated if they tell their voters something that they wouldn't want to tell their priest, all that kind of thing. Then there's the struggle against a very ruthless monotheistic enemy, Islamic jihadism, which I think must condition the atmosphere somewhat, in that the term faith-based can be applied to that phenomenon.
Sure.
Just as the word godless, which served so well during the Cold War as a description of the enemy, would be a very poor description of the current enemy we face.
Yes,
I think that alters the intellectual weather a little.
Do you think that there's any benefit strategically because your reception here has been, as you said, very warm, and I've in my interactions with Christians, I've found very much the same thing. Do you think that there might be some strategic benefit in aligning ourselves with the sort of the moderating Christians against Islam and against things that are really, really scary and threatening? Or is that an unholy alliance?
It's already the case that many members of the 82nd Airborne, who, for all I know, well, I do know, many of them would be devout Baptists, are in fact fighting for secularism in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's an irony of history that I appreciate very much, and that George Bush sent them there. And I would say they were doing God's work as well. That'll have to be it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Man.
All right. Thank you, sir.
So thank you again to the good professor, Dr. Christopher Hitchens, for joining us here on the Apologia podcast and giving some insight.